Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is another installment of Fresh Red Kills. So, Fresh Red Kills are the videos where I talk about the books that I've recently finished reading. I don't do Friday reads because I don't have a recording schedule at all. I kind of just record when I can and when I feel like it. And I'm in a little bit different location today. I'm actually downstairs in my library. I usually film in my office upstairs where I'm surrounded by my TBR shelves. These are books that I have read. So I'm in a corner of my library right now because the house is quiet. And figured, maybe a little change of scenery would be nice. Don't have to kind of hide in my office for a quiet space. If you're new to my channel, of course, this is a booktube channel. I talk about books. I don't script my videos. They are very informal. They are unscripted, of course, and that's it. You're just kind of getting me off the cuff. So, two things that I read that I'm going to be talking about. I have Cunning Folk, Life in the Era of Practical Magic, and American Gospel, God, the Founding Fathers, and the Making of a Nation by John Meacham. So I'll talk about this one first. Both of these I read for Historathon 2025. Historathon is a year-long reading event where we read, discuss, and celebrate nonfiction history. We divide the year up into 4 quarters, each quarter looking at a different time period, each quarter also being 3 months long. We are in the last month right now of quarter 3, which looks at the years 1500 to 1820. So that fit in right here. This is, the author is Tabitha Stanmore, and this looks at especially 1500s, 1600s, the way that magic was viewed by common people, especially mostly in England. That's kind of where the main focus is. But we're not talking about witches. So the whole idea here is that a witch was somebody who was working with demons or the devil or something like that, and they of course could be executed. But people believed in all sorts of magic back then, and not all magic was considered wicked or evil or anything like that. And a lot of it was just part of their daily lives. They could be, good luck charms. It could be somebody trying to predict the future. Some people were working with angels rather than demons. She talks about how there's kind of a very fine line between being a cunning person, somebody who knows magic, and being like a priest. It's just like one was kind of verified by the church, the other one wasn't. But they're doing a lot of very similar things in a lot of ways. And she gives a good variety of different types of cunning folk. Some of them were obviously honest and helping people. Others, had a reputation for being swindlers. Some of them were being accused of trying to kill the king with magic. Others were, saving, helping, members of the royal family and the nobility. And some of them were kind of funny. Early on, she talks about the ways that some women tried to put love spells on men. One of them, I think, was bum cakes or bum bread or something like that, where they used their bottom to help create the food and give it to the guy. There's also another one where they would put fish in a place where you shouldn't put fish within your body, and then serve it to the man to try and, I guess, put that spell on him. So very odd. Not all of them are like that, but that's certainly some of the ones that stuck out to me. But like I said, we get into things like the Roma and the parts that they played. At the end, she talks about the way that they were viewed in society, how there does seem to be a split the way that people saw them. Some people viewed them in a favorable way, and they sought them out quite a bit, and some people paid them a lot of money. And she kind of says, if they weren't helping people, they probably would not have gotten all this money, all these customers. So people must have, at least to a certain degree, felt that they were valid and they were doing good. And then there are people who didn't trust the cunning folk, who would, beat them and throw them out of their house if they saw them, for various reasons. Maybe they thought they were, working with dark forces. Maybe they thought that they were con men. So, it's sort of ran the gamut of how they were viewed. But the bottom line was that they weren't necessarily considered witches. There were some cunning folk that ended up being accused of witchcraft, but as she says in here, that didn't actually happen very often. Many cunning folk live their lives without being accused of that sort of thing. So, we look at that time period and we think, witchcraft, if you were doing a spell, people would have thought that you were a witch. That's not really the way that it worked. Magic was just a regular part, kind of like, some people turn to astrology today, that sort of thing. Back then, she says astrology was a science. It was not considered, some kind of esoteric thing. So yeah, I would recommend this. I like this one quite a bit. And I also read, and both of these, by the way, I read in August. I didn't say that yet, but these were both read in August. We have American Gospel, God, the Founding Fathers, and the Making of a Nation by John Meacham. And this is one of his older books, actually. This came out in, I think, the early 2000s. He's had quite a few very successful books since then. So I want to see if I can find the year on here. 2006, so it's not really old, but it's one of his earlier books. And I had read a book, I think, was it earlier this year or last year, about the separation of church and state. And one of the authors, it was authored by two people, who basically was quoting this all the time. Really, this was like their main source. And this book is not exactly about the separation of church and state. That is a part of it. But what John Meacham is really kind of getting at here is that the Founding Fathers created what he refers to as public religion. It's not explicitly Christian. Many of the Founding Fathers were not really Christians, maybe deists or things like that, but a lot of them were not what we would consider devout Christians who were praying and believed in, the divinity of Christ and things like that. So they made a country which, yes, separated church and state, but didn't exactly separate religion and government. So what we end up having with the Founding Fathers especially is, yes, maybe they would pray or they would evoke a deity, but it was not explicitly a Christian God. We see that with the Declaration of Independence. We see the absence of any kind of reference to God in the Constitution. We have a lot of things that they wrote about this sort of thing, and they would kind of give very, very vague descriptors or, prayers to God, but in a way that people can kind of fill that word in with whatever they wanted. Maybe it was a Christian God, or maybe it was, a Jewish, conception of God, or a Muslim, or maybe it was, not a monotheistic expression, or maybe somebody wanted to just kind of take that word God out and replace nature, or whatever it might be. They allowed for that. And he kind of follows various presidents after the founding, and the ways, and not just the presidents, but also the ways that people have used religion inside American politics. Sometimes in good, effective ways, like maybe Martin Luther King Jr., that sort of thing. And sometimes not so much. By the end, he is talking about things like the religious right and Jerry Falwell, and how especially they did not seem to understand what the Founding Fathers were doing. But, for the most part, most presidents, not the one currently in the office, but most presidents have kind of followed that more public religion view of things, that sort of way of approaching religion and politics. Basically what he's getting at here is you can't take away religion from society, whether you want religion or not. It's just kind of a part of being a human. You can't take it out of the public sphere. At the same time, you can't let it, basically tyrannize others. Can't force people to believe. So the Founding Fathers understood this line, understood this tightrope they were walking, and they did it pretty well. And many other presidents, like Abraham Lincoln and some of the ones that we can rightfully admire in a lot of ways, walk that same sort of line. It's only in the past couple decades that we've seen a decline in misunderstanding of what the founders were actually trying to do. So yeah, I thought this was quite interesting. Like I said, I expected something more about the separation of church and state. That's not exactly what this is. It's more about, again, just to kind of repeat myself, yes, there's separation of church and state, but that doesn't mean that there is a separation of religion and government. And somehow those two things have to coexist without destroying the rights of others. So yeah, I would recommend this. I thought it was pretty good. It was more like an extended essay. He even refers to it in that way, and I agree. It feels like an extended essay in a lot of ways. But yeah, I've always liked John Meacham whenever I read them, and I like this one. So those are two that I read for Historathon in August. We've got Cunning Folk, right? Life in the Era of Practical Magic, and we've got American Gospel, God, the Founding Fathers, and the Making of a Nation. So if you've read either of these, love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you, BookTube.